Welcome to Tony's Cheap Camp. If you've never followed me before, I often come down to Dartmoor for wild camping, and I usually bring, let's say, not cheap equipment with me. I normally bring state-of-the-art, super lightweight Cuban fibre shelters. But I wanted to try something a little bit different this time. So what I've done is I looked on Amazon and I found the cheapest tent that they did. And I've packed it in here with pegs. These are the pegs that came with the tent. So the pegs and the tent weigh 1 kilogram. Now, most of my shelters are significantly less than 1 kilogram. It cost £21. So normally my shelters would cost many hundreds of pounds, many hundreds of pounds. So I'm using a tent today that weighs probably twice as much, give or take a bit, and cost £20. Now, I will admit one thing. I am going to put in one little caveat here. This is an untried, untested tent. I'm doing this because I have quite a lot of experience, nearly 10 years worth of camping out here. I have backup equipment, so it's perfectly safe. If you will be doing something like this and you get this tent or a cheap tent, go to a campsite, you know, for safety, or camp in your back garden the first time. Right, what we have here is a Chinese £21 tent. Now, I will say you probably have seen other videos of this tent, but I'm not convinced that anyone has ever camped out in one. Now, I've not pitched this thing at all, so it's kind of... And that is, I brought this with me. Now, it is slightly cheating, I will admit. It is a tarp, and you will see why I've brought the tarp with me. When you see the tent, given the design of the tent, you will understand why I've brought a tarp with me. Now, my tarp is a Sil Nylon Mountain Laurel Designs dog tarp. It's around about 2 meters square, so it's not a human tarp. It's not designed for a human to sleep under it, so I don't consider it a complete cheat tarp, but you will understand why I've brought it. You will also understand that most people will be able to buy a tarp, you know, cheaply enough. So I'm just going to use it for comfort. So I'm just going to use it, you know, as a tiny extra degree of comfort, especially if the weather becomes inclement, which it's likely to do. A little bit of an experiment. I'm going to use the original pegs. If they're rubbish, I have backup pegs. Another thing I just want to say, normally you would pitch a tent with the tail to the wind. Now, given that this has no porch and the front angles down at an angle like this, and I'll be inside it. If I was to pitch this tail to the wind and it rains, which it's going to, and I open it, rain is going to come straight inside. So this is a huge compromise in safety, comfort, you know, everything else. So this is why I'm deliberately going to be pitching this nose to the wind with a tarp, which I've brought with me, to cover the front, so that, you know, I can actually make it hospitable inside. Now, as with any shelter, when you're pitching a pole inside, you want to be pushing the pole through. Don't pull the pole, because if you pull the pole, it's going to come apart. And if it comes apart, especially on a cheap one like this, then there's a real danger that you could break the pole. So you do need to thread these through very carefully and sensibly. So this looks relatively straightforward. I'm thinking that just goes in there. I think maybe we need a peg just to stop this thing from blowing away. I'm going to use these cheap pegs that are included. In all honesty, they'll probably, hopefully, hold this thing down. There, to be honest, I think these pegs will probably hold this. Once again, with this one, you just make sure all of the wires are installed, and you thread through there, thread it up through. The other compromise with this shelter, if it was raining, the top, which I'll show you in a minute, that, so the workmanship on this is pretty shoddy. Oh dear, well, what can you expect for £21, eh? Look at the stitching detail on that. That is pretty shocking stitching on that. So we'll see, hopefully that lasts 2 days. I do have on me a repair kit. I hope I don't need it. You can see how the top is somewhat exposed to the weather, so we'll see how that goes. Okay, well, oh God, Tony, what are you doing with this? This is a bit different to what I usually. You can see why I'm pitching it this way, because I am thinking that I need to give some protection to the front, because if it rains, rain is going to come down here, and I'm just thinking that if I open this, rain is just simply going to flood inside, and my head is literally going to be here. I could sleep, you know, clearly at the other end, but I don't want to be doing that in here. I could turn the tent around and have, I just noticed another thing, it's not seam sealed. Oh God. So, and I didn't, it's not only is it not seam sealed, but I didn't bring my seam sealing stuff with me, but I'm not going to spend ages sealing it. I clearly could pitch it the other way around, but I'm just thinking that, you know, if it's raining and I need to get out, I really don't want to open these doors and just rain and this wet just to flood in on me. So I really do think that, unfortunately, given the shape of this thing, I need to pitch it into the wind and then offer some protection to my door to give me a port. So what we do get are these little ties here. So we'll tie these up, I think, in a bow like that, and that should be enough. They supply this cover thing, so they have thought about ventilation. You get these little hook things here. So one hook goes there, another hook goes there, and then another hook goes there. Straight away we can tell that this is not a storm-worthy shelter. So if you're using this shelter, do not use it in conditions like I'm likely to be experiencing here. Apart from the fact you would need to seam seal it, this is not seam sealed. You'd have to seal these seams for safety. Driving rain will be blown up here straight down into that mesh. There's no way of securing this down here. If you had some Velcro stitched across there and seam sealed, and at the other side you could do that, you'd still have, even if that was done like that to give it some protection, you would not be compromising your breathability inside, because the edges here and here on this side would allow air to get to that mesh, just about. And also, you wouldn't need to do both sides up. So if you know a seamstress, you could put Velcro there, Velcro on the other side, and you wouldn't need to Velcro up both sides either. You could Velcro up just the windward side and leave the other side open for ventilation, because the rain will basically come across there and straight down. Wind and rain cannot get into both sections at the same time. Right, now we're just going to have a look at the door, because as I say, the door actually, apart from the fact there's no porch on it, should be relatively storm-proof. Well, I don't know if it's storm-proof, but if rain did run down, as long as you've got the internet zipped up, then it does drop below the net there. So if you don't have a tarp over it, like I'm going to be putting over a third of it, and rain and the wind and the rain did hit this, it would come down and run over the edges there. Like I said, the only slight problem is if you have a strong wind coming in the direction that you're pitched, like in my instance, it quite possibly could, well, it's quite tight, so wind may not be able to blow that up. I was thinking maybe rain could, or wind could blow that and rain could get blown underneath, but maybe not. Maybe not. You do get door ties 2 of them indeed. Yeah, the Chinese have thought of that. So you could open it like that and that, like that, to keep just the outer one open and have, I've done that one up there, but you could have the bug netting done up by itself, or you can do both up. There is a tie there. I mean, it's not bad for 20 for literally £20, and there's a decent amount of headroom. Length looks okay. Width is reasonable. Clearly there's a million and one compromises. I've kind of done this with it. This is giving me protection. This is giving me some protection at the front. The wind is coming from around about this angle. I've pitched this side lower. Originally, what I had done is I'd put the 2 poles at the back to have the back sort of raised up and then the front lower to give protection to the front. But what I really found is that the front was so low I couldn't get in properly. So what I've done is I've pitched these 2 sides quite low, and then these 2 sides high, so that I can actually get in. The tarp coming just over halfway. Quite easy now to get in. You just walk up to the tarp, which is here. Duck down, step in, turn around, and you're in. And, you know, I've got a degree of protection here. I probably will do this door up at night to be on the safe side, given the wind is coming directly towards me. That's my feet there, and my feet in this configuration are inside, kind of, you know, give or take a bit. Obviously, if it suddenly started raining, obviously I have cheated by putting a tarp over the top. It's clearly not, you know, a tent designed for being out here. So, you know, that's why I brought the tarp, which is a small tarp anybody could use. It's not really cheating. Well, it has been raining very hard here, as you can see, and we've been using this little cheapy tent, and we have had rain ingress on this side particularly, all the way down to dripping there. It's been getting in more easily on this side because the wind is blowing this side, so I think it's more wind blown rain into this seam here, plus given the angle that it, because it's not as tight, you can see it's looser, so I think rain is more easily getting in here, and that's why we've got so much water down that side. I don't quite know where it's going to go, but given there are holes literally out there, I think it will just escape. Look, there's a puddle. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that water that's collected there. This is under my airbed. This is rain that's got in. But the stitching is so poor in that corner, it is actually running out. It is actually going to be able to escape there. The stitching is so shocking. It's going to get out there eventually. We are... the tent might not be waterproof, but we're on top. There's more water down there as well, look. Look at this. I've got a bloody fish pond in the tent. That's funny. Oh God, only I would do something so stupid as this. Look at it, it's soaked. It's soaked, it's soaked, it's soaked. Clickbait, clickbait, clickbait. My tent flooded. My tent sank. My tent has sunk. My tent sank. Well, there you go. Everything is rather wet. Sometimes the thing, if you want wet, don't get wet. Oh God. Okay, but inside, other than what we're sitting on, which is like, we're literally, this is the new Chinese water tent. The Chinese water tent, that's what this is. This is a new Chinese water tent. Oh God. So these seams seem. Okay, there's very little water ingress in these seams. Last night there was a few dribbles came in here, but very, very little. The main culprit is this seam along here, and as like I said, the rain just comes down and just gets straight through there, particularly, mainly on this side over here. That's the main culprit, because this is the wind-blown side. Yeah, it's a good thumbnail. My tent sank. my Chinese tent sank. So Chinese not only sent over a bug, they sent over a sinking tent as well. Oh God. Oh dear. I don't think I have any Chinese viewers. I'll probably get like 1,000 Chinese viewers now. I mean, I'm being a bit unfair on the tent, really, to be honest. I mean, it's apart from that, and you know, we knew that we needed protection. It's just, I must admit, I hadn't foreseen that. If I'd have foreseen that, I would have brought seam sealer with me, because more rain is forecast later on and tomorrow, and it would be interesting, you know, because it's going to be dry now. Could have put some seam sealer on that this afternoon, and it probably would have dried enough that it probably would have sorted that out, to be honest. Anyway, it's a bit of fun, isn't it? It's just a 1 night, 2 night trip, and it doesn't matter, you know. It's simply it doesn't matter because I've got all my electrics over this side. Everything critical is in a dry bag. I'm literally in a dry bag. It's a good job I did put the dry bag to bivvy in. So it's fine, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, it's all just good fun. Okay, what I'm going to do here, so I'm just going to show you the outside of this tent here. Now you can see, because this £20 or however much it was tent doesn't have a porch, obviously when you're wild camping you really do need a porch of some description, or at the very least you need the front so that when you open it, the rain doesn't get straight inside. So that's why I just added this piece of tarp just over the front entrance. Realistically, whilst it's not included in the price of the whole setup, so basically the cost of this trip in cooking pot, burner, mat, sleeping bag and shelter was £90. I used my own rucksack because pretty much we've all got a rucksack big enough to put a few items in for a wild camp, so I didn't bother including that. I'll just show you the outside here to give some height over here for easy or easy-ish access and de-access, entrance and exiting. And then this side I've just kept low because I don't have poles over here basically. The tarp on this side has done nothing to add any protection whatsoever to the tent. Literally it's just, that's the only way that it is to hold it in place. All the leakages have appeared on this seam down here. So if you do get this tent, get some seam sealant and seal those all the way around the bottom. You might find that the seal here, the seam here and here is waterproof-ish enough. I have used, and it's not cheating because again, you know, whilst most of you probably don't have a bivvy, you know, it's not a bad idea to have like an emergency daytime bivvy for a daytime walk or something like that. So if you've got something like that and you haven't done this type of camping before, not a bad idea to put your emergency bivvy in. You know, if you've got a small light one. I only say that because obviously in this instance the tent around the bottom leaked. If I'd have seam sealed down at the bottom it wouldn't have leaked and I wouldn't have needed the bivvy, which I did use, and I'm very pleased that I had that because I would have got wet, I'm very sure. So that's just one other thing that you may want to add, but subscribe to my channel and follow my exploits if you've even got this far. The only other thing that I've just done on the outside of this tent is, because it is literally held down by 1, 2, 3, 4 pegs, nothing else at all is holding it in place. I did add one line here down to a peg down there, and one line which you might just see under there, again down to a peg down there, just to try and stop it from being forced into my face by the Dartmoor winds out here. The sides do get blown in, you know, quite a bit, as you can see, especially when you're on the inside. But, you know, let's face it, it's a £20 shelter, so we were never expecting miracles with this. Indeed, this was just sort of an exploration of cheap equipment and to see how well, or not, it performs. The stitching on this is really quite shocking, to say the least. But really, if you do get one of these, just get some seam sealant on this seam here, that one there. Don't worry about anything else. Maybe just there seems to be a seam that goes underneath as well, just there, so maybe get some sealant on that as well. But you really probably would get away with just seam sealant on this seam here, and that will probably be enough to make that tent 80 to 85 to 90% watertight, even without a tarp on it, because as I showed you or explained, the seams that run vertically surprisingly didn't leak very much. I would definitely be tempted to have a tarp over the front though, just so you have a porch to do some things in. If you do get a gas cooker, a gas stove, like I did this one here, again, this was cheap. This was like £13 or something on Amazon, and I'll do a video on that. If you do get a stove, just make sure that you've got some foil or something just to go around the outside of it, just so the wind doesn't affect the performance of it. That's one thing I didn't get or didn't bring with me. And I'll do a verdict on the other cheap items I've got: a cheap sleeping bag, cheap mat, cheap pot and pan, and cheap stove. Subscribe, check out my other videos on those items, you know, because not everybody can afford Cuban fibre, mountain laurel designs, you know, equipment just to start off with. Once you started, you like it, then pop over to MLD and buy it. Okay, I just wanted to do a little sort of update on tent video. The wind is blowing quite strongly. It's by no means gale force from this direction, and for most of the night this wall here has been blowing in, and despite the fact that I have that cord attached here running to the outside down to the ground on a peg, the lower part of the pole has been trying to knock me out. Now you might actually be able to mitigate that as well, because there is on each side here a bungee cord for tying your door up, and theoretically there's no reason why you couldn't just whip another cord around that and tie that down. You can see the wall is trying to get a bit too friendly. So of course when that happens, your internal space does reduce, you know, a lot. We all have to realise, and I certainly realise, as does you know, anyone watching this. This is a £20 tent. You know, we were never expecting miracles with this. This really is a tent where you're going to be using it in a campsite with your children, probably, where you're going to use it in the summer months. I wouldn't be taking it into the middle of Dartmoor like this. It's really not really up to this type of usage. If you do get it though, and you are going to be using it in the rain, just put some silicone sealant on this seam here. Even if you don't seal any of the other seams, which I have to say, and I've had a lot of rain here, I've had a surprising amount of rain on this, so those seams have been tested quite fully. You don't have to worry about those. If you've got a bit of sealant left, just whip a bit over, sure, but the main one is the hem. that one between the main thing and the, you know, and your ground sheet. You need sealant on that. It's very easy to do. All you would do is just, you know, apply a very small dribble along there, probably on the outside, and then just rub it in with your finger, and just you got a little thin line rubbed in over those holes, and that would almost certainly be enough. Fingers crossed. I haven't tested it, of course. To make this relatively watertight. Obviously your compromise is the door, because the door is completely open to your hedge. I know this, if the tarp wasn't here, I'd now be outside. So you do need a tarp over it to be able to use it in rain, because if you don't have a tarp over it, then rain's just going to come straight in, you know, onto your head here. So in the summer months it's doable, but there are many drawbacks to it. I think whilst you can get away with the cheap mat, which was what, 20 something pounds, the cheap stove, £13, the pot and pan was about £13, the sleeping bag was what, I don't know, £20, I've forgotten all the figures now. All of the other stuff, I would say, will work relatively well for wild camping. I don't think you need anything more expensive, as long as, generally speaking, the weather is okay. I just don't think this tent is realistically up for wild camping in the middle of Dartmoor. There's too many compromises. It would only take, you know, the stitching, because the stitching is really not good on this either. The only other thing is, of course, as I mentioned before, if you don't have a tarp over here, you need something really. But if you don't, this mesh panel here, which of course is very good for ventilation, but then you've got this cover thing here. You imagine the tarp's not there. You've got this cover thing here, and it only just covers the mesh. And if that's going to get blown up in a wind, then rain's going to go straight over that, and then of course straight down here. So, you know, it's not storm worthy. I wouldn't be wanting to use this like that. You'd need to get some Velcro stuck or stitched just to hold that down on the windward side. So that's another little modification that you would need to do. That would be essential. You know, otherwise you will get water come flooding in above you if there was a wind-blown rain. That's a major compromise. So, you know, suitability for what I'm doing, wild camping in the middle of Dartmoor. Standalone without additions, zero. You couldn't use it like this. If I'd have used it as is, without a tarp, without this bit up here covered, I probably would have abandoned it, because rain would have poured in on top. I'd have ended up taking this outside my bivvy and using the tarp in my own bivvy. I almost certainly would have had to have abandoned this if I'd have used it as is. So from that point of view, suitability for wild camping, probably zero. Okay, so we'll just have a quick once around here now. This is with the tarp taken down, everything taken out. You can see it's being battered quite a bit from the side, and you're losing quite a bit of internal space from there. Even if you did as I suggested and put a tie out here, it would help a little, but not a massive amount. No, clearly this is not a tent for Dartmoor. Mind you, the wind is now blowing clearly at its side. You know, it's coming from the from the west straight into the side of this thing now. You can't realistically, unless you completely seal it, pitch it rear to the wind in case it floods. You definitely have a massive compromise here. You know, you can see how the wind is blowing that. You can see the mesh under there. That will easily flood. You know, a rain will easily get under there. The actual integrity of the shelter, it has stood up well. It did throw that one peg there, but I used all of the original pegs, 1, 2, obviously 3, 4, and apart from this one over here, which did come out for some reason last night, all of the pegs have stayed in position. But I won't be sorry not to be using this one again. If anyone has any ideas on how I can maybe do a giveaway on this, this might be worth. I've been talking about doing a giveaway for ages. Tony's rejected tent. I'm sure it's got uses. Just clearly not in the middle of Dartmoor, even in the middle of summer. There's just too many compromises with this, but it was a fun shelter. So yeah, maybe I could do this as a giveaway on this one. So any ideas on how I can do that, drop a comment below. I'd like to try and, before I give things away, and I did do a comment earlier this year on doing a giveaway, and I hadn't really worked out what I was going to give away. Clearly I'm not giving away a Rolex, as one or two of you cleverly suggested. But I'm still hoping to try and sort of build up a few more views and things like that. So I'm not in any immediate rush, because the views on average are still 300, 400, 500, something like that, and the subscriber count is relatively static still at the moment, despite that I'm, you know, making a few tweaks here and there. So I'm kind of working on, you know, just trying to build it up a little bit more before I do a giveaway. But this might very well be worth, you know, doing at some point. So thank you for watching the tent review and this trip of Dartmoor. Okay, now testing. Now you can see I've taken the 2 tie points off there, and you can see what the breeze has done. It's undone these 2 top. I haven't touched anything, I just noticed it. I better record this. It's undone at least 2 of those. So quite clearly this is most definitely not a Dartmoor storm weather, reasonably bad weather shelter.